This is a Kirkendall Barrett presentation. Well, hello everybody. It is your favorite day of the week. It is time for another episode of The Reality Reading Rainbow, where I talk about books written by reality stars, especially those from Bravo, and try to make sense of them. I also do interviews. We're going to get started in one moment, but just wanted to touch on a couple of things before we start. First of all, thank you for your support. I really appreciate it. Second of all, we actually have a Patreon. Now, as you know, I read books. Books cost money. And so I've started a Patreon. There are levels ranging anywhere from $3 a month and up. It is not a requirement at all. I know that right now everybody is dealing with job stuff. So if you could throw a couple of bucks, great. If you can't, that's okay, because you know what? At the end of the day, your presence is my present. So that's that. Also, I am open to listener suggestions as far as the books I pick. And there are plenty of ways that you can get a hold of me. You can find me on our Facebook page, which is The Reality Reading Rainbow. So sign up for that. We have some great conversations as well. Or you can get a hold of me on Gmail at my Gmail address, which is therealityreadingrainbow@gmail.com. Yes, therealityreadingrainbow@gmail.com. And you know what? That's it. So on with the show. Well, hello everybody. It is your favorite day of the week. Another day of a lifetime of Hallmark. I am Les Kirkendall Barrett. Hello, Jason Bowers.
Hello, Les Kirkendall Barrett.
And hello, Kurt Fitzpatrick.
Hello, Les Kirkendall Barrett, and hello, Jason Bowers.
We take movies from both Lifetime and the Hallmark Channel and try to make sense of them.
We're not very successful, though, because they don't often make sense, but they are fun to watch.
And we go down all kinds of rabbit holes. We talk about Angelian quite a bit. We talk about the show Enos.
June Squibb. We are Team June Squibb all the way.
And we have Black China news every single episode.
So with that in mind, why don't you listen to a lifetime of Hallmark? You can listen wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Well, hello, everybody. It's time for another episode of The Reality Reading Rainbow, where I talk about books written by reality stars, primarily those from Bravo, and I try to make sense of them, and I sometimes do interviews. I'm Les Kirkendall Barrett, and I am absolutely excited to have this person here. If you are not reading the book, The Housewives, the real story behind the Real Housewives, pause this podcast, go to Amazon, order it, or Audible. I'm doing the Audible thing. But this is I have been reading this for the past like day and a half, and I cannot put it down. If you want to know the goings on and the behind the scenes and get answers to a lot of questions that I know I as a viewer have, read this book. And let's welcome Brian Moylan. Welcome and thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. And how is listening to my big gay voice on the Audible? Is it making you like even gayer?
I don't know if I can get gayer, but I'm pretty gay. But
okay, phew.
But seriously, I am loving this book. And I'm serious, like I cannot put it down. I started yesterday, and it's a pretty long book, and your chapters, especially in Audible, are pretty long. And I'm on chapter 13. So this is like within 24 hours.
You're almost done. I promise.
And well, it's so funny because you talk about something in the book. So you were talking about Bravo groups and shenanigans in the various Bravo groups. And this podcast was originated in one of the groups with the shenanigans.
Can I ask which group?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I won't say the name of the group but I'll tell you the shenanigan. And I'll tell you the name of the group. Okay. I'll tell you the name of the group off air.
Right.
But so the shenanigan was when the person faked the flood in their house.
Yes.
I am in that group.
Got it. Okay.
And I joined after the stuff went down, but that story is a story of legend.
Yeah, and like oh my God, the things that I got from asking for Facebook drama, I mean, both large and small. And I mean, what the crazy thing is, as I like to say, everything about Housewives eventually becomes Housewives. So I'm glad your podcast is about reading, because maybe that will keep you from turning into a Real Housewife.
Oh, well, and so here's the thing. So the thing is, and the reason I'm not telling you the group on air is because after that whole thing went down, they literally did a sweep of the group to get rid of all of the troublemakers and all of the people that were causing the problems that you went on to discuss that happened in other groups too.
Right.
So now this group is a group, there's no nonsense for bullshit. There's no nonsense for like racism or anything. They'll kick your ass out in a second. A second. But it was so funny as I was reading it. I'm like, wait a minute, I know this story.
Hold on a minute. This is my real life.
So question for you: did you have a hard time finding people to talk to? Were people willing to speak to you, or how did that go?
The book in general, or about shenanigans?
In general, all of it.
Well, it was a little hard because I had initially told Bravo about my project, and because I had a good relationship with them, and I know that every housewife who has to ask Bravo for approval before doing an interview about the Housewives, like even if they've left the show. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted them to hear it from me, and then we talked about partnering up, and there were some negotiations back and forth, and they told my editor that they would set up interviews, that they would help promote the book, give me everything I wanted, but they wanted 10% of sales and complete editorial control over the book, to which my editor was like, no way, you're crazy. And so they responded by emailing every housewife, every producer, everybody who's ever been on the show, and telling them not to talk to me. So that made it very difficult. And I did have some people where I had organized interviews and then they mysteriously disappeared, or people who would organize interviews and then, cancel at the last minute, or people that said, I really wanted to talk to you, but I'm hoping to get back on the show. So there was a lot of that. So yeah, it was pretty difficult to find people, but I got about a dozen housewives, about half on the record, half off the record. And, you know, I talked to a ton of producers, editors, story editors, camera operators, sound guys, like people like that, who I found to be really great and really revelatory about the show in a way that I don't think the women can be because they're so involved in it. And yeah, and I think it's really great because this is what they have to say when I promise them anonymity. So this is what they can say when they know Bravo can't get back at them. Because I think usually the behind the scenes stuff we get is through Bravo. And so there's always that kind of filter on it of what Bravo wants you to see. And so this is kind of what I hope is the truth. Yeah.
And the thing is, you really go there. You really go there.
Yeah, I'm well known for going there.
And you literally do answer all of the questions that we've had. And I take it that the way the questions were asked, you are a fan as well, correct?
Absolutely. Oh my God. Like, yeah, a huge fan. I wouldn't have dedicated the better part of 10 years of my life to writing about, researching, talking about the Housewives if I didn't love it. And I still love it. And I even watch the shows I don't recap. And, you know, it really is a pleasure to get to do this for a living and get to interact with people like yourself and fans and just like talk about this all the time. I mean, it really is great. And, you know, and I can be harsh on it. I can be harsh on Bravo. But they do put out a great product, and whatever they're doing is working. And so, you know, I'm happy for all that. But I did want, you know, the truth. And I think a lot of times, viewers now, especially, we've been into reality for so long now, and into the Housewives in particular for like almost 15 years, that we kind of sense these things. Like you can feel it around the edges. Like, does Bravo pay for the trips, or do the women? And we kind of know the answer, but they won't answer. You know, Bravo won't give us a clear answer. So I'm glad that it's like down on paper so fans can know, like, oh, I'm not an idiot. Like, this is how it works. And I know that.
Yeah, I loved you told this one story about this woman named Erica at BravoCon. Can you go into that a little bit, just for the listeners who haven't read the book yet?
Oh yeah, so Erica, like, when it was this great panel, they did 2 of them. They maybe even did 3 of them, but it was producers from all the shows talking about what it's like to work on Bravo behind the scenes. And I mean, those were my personal favorite panels at BravoCon. These were people that worked on like Scary Island and the Candace and Monique fight and like all these iconic moments, and just talking about them. And Erica kind of asked, you know, who pays for the trips, and all the producers kind of dissembled and wouldn't give them an answer. And finally a PR person gave one of them the okay to say Bravo pays for the trips, and everybody like erupted in applause. And then, you know, I did more research into exactly how that works, and, you know, who's getting paid and who's getting discounts and blah, 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 and really went into all of that. And so I hope that people, and I feel like Bravo is afraid that if we know about how the sausage gets made, we're not going to be into the sausage anymore. But I feel like I only enjoy it more the more I know how it gets made. But I mean, I'm sure there are other people that disagree with that, but yeah.
Well, I mean, I think of it this way. I mean, first of all, we're not dumb. We all know, we all know that the women aren't paying for this, because sometimes the woman who is hosting it is the woman who can't necessarily afford it.
Yes.
And also, I mean, come on, we watch shows like The Bachelor and all these other shows where they take these exotic trips, and we know the network is paying for it. So I don't get what the big deal is.
Agree. This is something for you. I have all sorts of hot tips for you, but so this is not in the book, but Bravo actually gets a read of all the Housewives books before they go to get published.
Oh.
And can ask for things to be removed from the books if they like.
And you know how this tracks? So my very first book that I read, and the reason how this podcast came to be, is I found Denise Richards' book for like $1 in a bin in some in like Goodwill. And as a joke, as a joke, I would put excerpts on the page and people were like, oh my God, you need to turn this into a podcast. So that's how it happened. But the thing is, Denise was very forthcoming in her book. And
was the book pre or post show?
Pre.
Okay.
This is during the time that she had her show on E. Like the book is really old.
Yeah.
The book that she mentions having a friendship with Lisa Rinna, by the way, this book was like 2010, 2011. But she was very honest in the book and she gave a lot of details and she really went there. And I can tell when reading these Housewives books that they'll kind of go, but they don't fully go in where you would expect them to.
Yeah, at least when it comes to like anything about production or Bravo or any of that, they really don't want the women talking about it. So, yeah. Also, this was cut from the book. I made a Real Housewives bestseller list of like whose books have sold the best. And
can we get that list?
Yeah, let me see. Please hold. I believe I have it. Hold on, I'm looking for it. Bestseller list. Here we go. So the number one bestseller of all of them is Andy Cohen's Most Talkative.
Okay.
Number 2 is Bethany Frankel, Naturally Thin.
Okay.
Number 3 is Bethany Frankel, A Place of Yes.
Okay, that's on my list actually. Okay.
Then it's Teresa Giudice, Skinny Italian.
All right.
Teresa Giudice, Turning the Tables, which is the prison book.
Right.
Erica Jane, Pretty Mess, which I co-wrote. You're welcome.
Right.
Brandy Glanville, Drinking and Tweeting.
I'm looking at a copy of that right now on my desk.
Teresa Giudice, Fabulicious, Fast and Fit. Teresa's low-fat, super easy Italian recipes. Taylor Armstrong, Hiding from Reality. Brandy Glanville, Drinking and Dating. Lisa Vanderpump, Simply Divine, A Guide to Easy, Elegant, and Affordable Entertaining. Jill Zarin, Gloria Kamen, and Lisa Wexler, Secrets of a Jewish Mother. Teresa Giudice, Standing Strong. Sheree Whitfield, Wives, Girlfriends, and Side Chicks of Hotlanta.
Okay, I love the title.
Oh my God. Yeah, that was like a novel, I think.
Okay.
Kyle Richards, Life is Not a Reality Show. Yolanda Hadid, Believe Me. This is 17 now. Luanda Seps, Class with the Countess. 18, Lisa Rinna, The Big Fun Sexy Sex Book. 19 is Nene Leakes, Never Make the Same Mistake Twice. 20 is Bethany Frankel, I Suck at Relationships So You Don't Have to. 21 is Carol Radziwill, The Widow's Guide to Sex and Dating. Melissa Gorga, Love Italian Style. Heather Dubrow and Terry Dubrow, Dr. and Mrs. Guinea Pig, present the only guide you'll ever need to the best anti-aging treatments. I mean, that itself is like a whole chapter. Danielle Staub, The Naked Truth.
I read that one.
Caroline Manzo, Let Me Tell You Something. Phaedra Park, Secrets of a Southern Belle. Ramona Singer, Life on the Ramona Coaster. Alex McCord and Simon Van Kempen, Little Kids, Big City. Kim Fields, Blessed Life. Aviva Drescher, Leggy Blonde. Vicki Gunvalson, More Than a Housewife. And last and least, Cynthia Bailey and Peter Thomas, Carry On Baggage, Our Nonstop Flight.
Well, because if they gave marriage advice in that book,
So at the time of when I wrote the book and compiled the list, there had been 31 Real Housewives books. And since then, I think Margaret's book has come out. So we're at 32, 33, including Andy Cohen's first memoir.
Because, Margaret's came out about a month ago, probably a little over a month
about
ago.
that, a few weeks before mine, But anyway, so there you go, the exclusive on the Bravo bestsellers list.
You've heard it here first, folks.
Exactly. I mean, everything I use for that book, I'm repurposing somehow.
So one of the things that I found interesting is how you went, went and you described what the producers do. And I loved the phrase when you kind of you call the producers producers agents of chaos.
Yes.
I liked that. Can you can you explain a little bit what you meant? Because I was like, oh my, because I found it fascinating, and it made perfect sense just as well.
I think a lot of times fans think producers are like, oh, the Trace Amigas need to make up, or you need to fight with this woman, or you need to do this. But they're not really doing that. They're letting the women make their own choices, but they're doing it in a way where they're saying like, oh, well, Lisa said this about you. Are you going to let her say that about you? And then the woman decides how they're going to react and what they're going to say. Or, they're always like planting seeds and seeing how it's going to turn out. So they're not really scripting them or directing them in a way. They're just creating these environments where the women's natural personalities and the dynamics in the friend group can really take over and become the sort of things that we see on television. So it's not as much of the invisible puppet strings, I think, that people think are on all the women. And it's a little bit more, insidious. I think that the women, a lot of the times the calls are coming from inside the house, they know what the producers want. And so they're kind of bringing it to them.
Because the thing is, when you think about it, in order for it to be successful and, work with the audience, the viewers, there has to be something organic about it. Or,
yes,
we're absolutely not stupid. We see, we see stuff like you mentioned about what I found fascinating, as well as you mentioned about like the made up jobs sometimes.
Yep. They may have or not have insinuated that some housewives, get themselves a little profession or a side hustle to talk about on the show. So, they like a lady of a job. So, yeah.
And so is that basically because initially it did start out about housewives, but then what made them change a little bit to want the women to have some sort of job?
Well, if you look at the initial seasons of The Real Housewives, most of the women have always been employed. And if you look at the first season, it's like Vicky, Gina, and Lori all worked. And then Joe sat at home, and Kimberly Bryant, who we have forgotten about, also, was a housewife. But I think that, we have to separate the idea of a housewife, classic Donna Reed, 1950s, cooking and cleaning for your man housewife, with a real housewife. And I think a real housewife has always been somebody who works, who has a family, is a woman of a certain age, is, somewhat affluent, aspirational, all these different things. And I think a lot of that includes, having jobs and trying to look like the women who watch the show. And I think it's like a heightened version of that. And most of the, the people that watch the show are women in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and they have jobs and families and whatever. And so I think that it's always been a part of it.
And the Housewives, that one of my favorite franchises is New York, where the women, they're all divorced, right? I think so. Or not married, either divorced or never been married in some cases. But what I like about that, though, because a lot of people complain that, oh, they're not housewives anymore. But I beg to differ, because this shows that a woman can have a life in her 50s after a divorce and still lead a very fun and vibrant life and get laid.
Yeah. Well, as I like to say, they're not housewives, they're real housewives. And the real housewife is a construct, and, they don't need to be married. They don't, Bethany said that when she started on the show, she wasn't married, she didn't live in a house, and she wasn't real. So, she didn't fit any of the categories of the title. But, I think she is definitely the realest of the Real Housewives, at least as in of itself. So, yeah, I like that they've sort of broken this idea of what a traditional housewife is to become something more modern and maybe feminist.
And Bethany is the most famous person to come out of the show and achieve her fame because of the show, correct?
I guess, yeah. I mean, Teresa Giudice is probably a close second, thanks to the table flip and the arrests.
Right.
The White House party crashers might be a third. Well, and so I was looking at former Real Housewives and who has the most followers on social media, and the number one was actually Larsa Pippen, who was on Real Housewives of Miami's first season because of her. She's part of the extended Kardashian universe. So she, yeah. So, you know, there's kind of different levels of fame and fortune throughout the franchise.
And apparently they're coming back, right? Miami?
Miami coming back. I don't know if or who of the original cast is going to be on the show, but I'm really excited for it. I always liked Miami. I thought it was gone before its time. No one from Miami has written a book, though. I'm sorry.
Right. I know. And it's so funny because out of all of the franchises, okay, question. So out of all of the franchises, what is your favorite show opening?
Oh, like the first episode?
Or no, like the first, like the music and the taglines and all that.
Oh, I feel like they're all kind of the same. A little bit. I really hate like Salt Lake or like Dallas, where it's like something photoshopped in. Like I want them to actually be holding like an apple or a diamond or whatever it is. In Miami they held mojitos.
Right, and because Miami was my favorite show opening because of the little song, which actually was a real legit song, and them holding the mojitos. And my confession is, I kind of fell out of Miami, but I would watch it to watch the opening.
Girl, you crazy. You are crazy. That's too much. But yeah, I always enjoyed Miami. Gone before its time. I mean, it always rated better than Dallas rates now. I don't know why we still have Dallas and we can't get Miami back. So.
And it's so, I love the part too where you listed the international Housewives shows.
Yeah.
Which I want to figure out, because I've seen Melbourne before.
Melbourne is like the only one that's really worth your time.
Which I don't get, because I know that Bravo was mentioning that one of the reasons why they don't have it is because the numbers weren't good. But the reason why the numbers weren't good is because they would show it like at 9:00 in the morning on a Saturday or something crazy.
Yeah. And so I hope maybe they give it another chance. There's a service I live in London full time, and
oh, you do?
We have this streaming service called Hayu, Hayu, and it's like all the trashy American reality shows. So it's like all the Housewives, all the Kardashians, Botched, like Snapped, like all that shit. And they have most of the international Housewives on there. They have Johannesburg, they have Melbourne, they have Sydney, they have Auckland. So that's how I've watched a handful of them, mostly to just check it out. But my favorite one is the Real Housewives of France, which they couldn't find any women in France who wanted to be on the show. So they had to cast French women in LA and film it in LA, like in French.
I love that. I love that. So you're based out of London, because my husband is English, so I'm in London like twice a year. So
well, how about my girl? Is he from London?
He's from Bristol, but I have a lot of in-laws in London. His brother lives in London, so normally we're in London for Christmas Eve, Christmas. And then his best friend lives in Leicester. And so we're in Leicester for Boxing Day and then back in London for New Year's Eve a lot of times. So.
Got it. I am from Bristol, but Bristol, Connecticut. So very different.
One of the interesting bits of trivia that you brought out as well is when you were listing the names of potential housewives, that Brenda Ritchie, Lionel Richie's wife, was potentially going to be a Beverly Hills housewife.
Yeah, she was rumored to be, going into the show. And I mean, she's amazing. She like caught Lionel and his mistress in bed and tried to beat them up. And, and now she was Nicole Richie's mom. So, I mean, that would have been excellent casting.
Right. And that makes sense because, Nicole and Paris were best friends,
Yeah.
which means she probably knows Kyle and Kim. She probably knows both of them. So yeah, that would make total sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me about, you mentioned like the black, but not, you didn't call it blacklisted housewives. The
Forever No list.
yes.
Yeah. So, fans are always saying like, oh, I wish Heather Locklear would be on the show, or I wish Nicolette Sheridan would be on the show because she is Harry Hamlin's ex-wife and Denise Richards' husband's ex-wife and whatever. And I talked to a couple of casting agents, and they said that every woman who you could think of has been approached and either doesn't want to do it and never wants to do it, or Bravo has interviewed them and they're too messy. So like Heather Locklear is on what they call the Forever No list, which is just like, don't bring these people up. We've already vetted them. We're not interested, or they're not interested. Like, let's not waste our time with those people anymore.
Nicolette
So
Sheridan.
I wish I'd have gotten the Forever No list, but yeah, it does exist.
Because Nicolette Sheridan would be good on the show.
I mean, but she's a Forever No. So, but also I think it's hard to say like who would be good on the show and who wouldn't be, because I think that, Denise Richards was good on the show until she wasn't, and Lisa Rinna was good on I think it's really hard. It takes a really specific set of skills and delusion and psychological damage to be a good Real Housewife. And so I think it's hard to say, and you really need to be willing to go there. And as Bethany says, mention it all. And so if Nicolette Sheridan, whoever, isn't prepared to really share everything, then it's not going to be really successful. And I think that's like what we saw with Kim Fields. Like Kim Fields did not want to go there. And so it was like, okay, girl, what are you even doing here?
Yes, I agree with that 100%. She was just too nice. She was just like, she's a nice lady. Yeah. And you can tell she's a nice lady, but
right.
Yeah.
And I mean, she's probably great to have dinner with, but that also makes her bad at the reality television arts and sciences. So sorry, Kim.
And the thing is, and I grew up with Facts of Life, so I didn't know. I think I'd be kind of disturbed watching Tootie like yell at people.
Yeah, tussling with Cynthia or whatever. Yeah. Yes. Well, I think she felt like she had too much to protect, because she was Tootie.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. And let's talk about, and I'm not at that part of the book yet, but so did you see last night's Real Housewives of New York yet? Did you see it?
I did, yes. The recap is already up.
The episode ends with Ebony being called an angry Black woman, and
and trash.
Yeah. And of course they put the to be continued. So I'm like, God damn it. But what did you find out as far as, the casting of Housewives of Color and dealing of Housewives of Color as far as integrated casts go and integrated casting?
Most of the research I did into the casting process was before the sort of resurgence of the Black Lives Matter in the wake of, George Floyd. So I didn't get to ask a lot because then, it's like I was doing a ton of research, and then once the pandemic started, I was like, okay, now no one's returning my calls. Everyone's freaked out. And so I just like sat down and started writing, and then was going through the writing and editing process. Because books take long. And so what I did here, before this was that some casting people had tried to get people of color onto the shows, and some queer women onto the shows, and Bravo wasn't particularly interested. But now it seems like they're obviously making to try to get more women of color onto the cast, obviously, as they should. And it seems to be having the effect that we want it to, which is it's forcing these women to have these conversations about race, as we've seen with Ebony, as we've seen with Garcelle and Crystal in Beverly Hills, sadly, as we've seen with Tiffany and Alice. And I think those are indicative of the conversations that a lot of us are having around the country about race now. And what's good about the Housewives, I don't know if I really mean this, but I think what's good about the Housewives is they're kind of bad at things like this.
Mm-hmm.
So you get someone like Garcelle or Crystal explain like, no, here's why saying I don't see color is actually a bad thing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you were raised to say like, oh, I'm colorblind, everyone's the same. But actually saying that is a little bit outdated because we need to acknowledge that, no, we are different. And because you are a person of color, you are treated differently. And I need to recognize that and, you know, take that into account in how I'm treating you and what I'm saying to you and things like that. So, yeah, so it's a very interesting time to say the least.
And the thing is, speaking of the Garcelle conversation, first of all, with the Crystal conversation, I was like, uh-oh, when she was like, are you that girl? I was like, oh shit, it's going down.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I actually liked about the Garcelle Kyle's conversation was that Kyle didn't try to double down. She didn't try to explain herself. And she said, oh, I didn't know that, but I know that now.
Yes.
Boom.
And right. Listened, grew, apologized, and will hopefully do better in the future. And it's like, and so I think that's what was interesting about that conversation with her and Garcelle at the beginning, and then Crystal and Sutton and Kyle at the end is like, you see Kyle handling it correctly,
right,
and Sutton handling it incorrectly. And
right.
So, you know, and obviously there's going to be people who feel all sorts of different ways about this. And, you know, maybe some people are going to take Sutton's side and see Crystal as a bully and, you know, whatever. It is Housewives. It's not going to be all cut and dried. But I do think it's good that we can see people struggling with these issues rather than just like pretending it's not there. But I do hope that Bravo and the production companies that make these shows are going to give these women some kind of protection from the fans and their castmates and its family, like we see with Tiffany in Dallas, where you know, they're really coming for her in a way that she does not deserve.
And so I'd like your take on this. So one of the things that I find interesting about Bravo is when stuff goes down, like, you know, a Jax saying something, or, you know, or even the Tiffany Moon stuff, and what the Westcotts were doing on Twitter, Bravo either stays silent or it takes them like a hell of a long time to make a statement. Why do you think that? And I know you wouldn't know exactly why, but why would you, since you know, you've been going inside.
Right. What I think is interesting is, and I heard this from a few Real Housewives, and they get really frustrated with Bravo or with production because, let's say there's an issue. For instance, this is like just totally an example. I don't know anything here, but like the Aviva Carol ghostwriter debate. And so they're having this fight on camera, and Bravo always films these kind of debates as like, well, Carol could be right, or Aviva could be right. She could have a ghost writer, or she could not have. And you get to decide, fans get to decide, you get to argue about it. And I think that is what is one of the good things about Bravo, is that we can take different sides and we can argue about it. But in these questions where there is an answer, it's like she either did have a ghostwriter or she didn't, you know, the show doesn't make it clear what the answer is. And I think that frustrates a lot of the Housewives, where it's like, I know what the truth is, you know what the truth is, so we'll debate. And I think they think that in relations and saying, you know, oh, we don't want to get involved in it. You know, the fans can decide, you can all debate about it. But this is like a totally different topic. And, you know, people are getting really worked up about it. And it's like Bravo is getting the protection of not looking so lily white by employing these women of color. And so they're getting something out of them. And for them to get that, they need to protect these women who are giving it to them and not just throw them to the wolves and have them like devoured, because they're not doing anything. Tiffany's not doing anything to get all these people yelling at her. She's just being Asian while on television. And I think that they needed to be faster with a comment. They need to tell fans to knock it off. You know, I mean, Andy makes a short video and tells people not to be racist. It's going to carry a lot of weight, but you know, we're not really seeing them employ that kind of stuff.
And then also, they, in a couple of cases, they, with the Vanderpump Rules people and a few other people, they lost their jobs. But then Andy then goes back and says, I don't know if that was the right decision. It's like, when look at on ABC when Roseanne said something racist, she was gone within 24 hours from her own show. From her own show.
Yeah.
So, so that's what I just find interesting, is that it seems like they're kind of like, okay, we'll just wait and it'll go away, and it doesn't.
Well, no, absolutely, and that's what Lisa tried to do at first with was it Max and Brent, who had kind of said racist things on Twitter, and she was like, oh, they were just stupid young kids and it's no big deal, and I know they're not racist and whatever. And then George Floyd happened and she was like, now I can't keep you guys around. And I think that there is this debate about kind of like calling people racist, like saying, oh, Stassi is a racist and she's irredeemable, as opposed to like Stassi did something that is racist. Like she engaged in racist behavior and, maybe she can be redeemed from that. I don't know what the question is, but I think that labeling people as racist and being like, you can never come back is not a good idea. Like Leva on Southern Charm said, she doesn't really cancel people because there's no growth there. And I think we do need to allow these people to grow, and just being like, you lost your job, you're never coming back, is just going to make these people more entrenched. I've been joking that Bravo should start a show called Doing the Work, where they have like Stassi and like, all these people who've done racist stuff come on the show and like learn how to not be racist. And like, once they've gone through the show, they can then like be reemployed again. It's like, here's your past. We taught you what you need to do,
And have like Ian Van Zandt or someone like that as the host.
Yeah, I mean, somebody and just like, or maybe have other housewives, because there are plenty of housewives who have been great about this, have treated the women well and have welcomed them. And I mean, you saw Sonia Morgan have Ebony's back last night. And I mean, Sonia Morgan, who like dated Donald Trump, and and you're like, oh, Sonia gets it. So
right. I was so proud of Sonia last night. So what I have to say, and I'll leave it with this, is I think that part of the issue with that is the way that the person, when they are caught doing something racist, the way they react. Because let's go back to Kyle.
Yeah.
Kyle was called out. Kyle said, I didn't think of it that way. Now I know. I apologize and I will do better. Whereas, some of these other people really like doubled down first, and then it's like too little too late.
Yeah. Or even Sutton being like, oh, there are stereotypes of rednecks and people from the South, and that's not me. And it's like, no, but you can't compare those things, and you should know why you shouldn't compare those things. And, and I think it's like, I don't think Kyle is a racist. Like, I don't think Stassi is a racist, but, Kyle did something racist unintentionally, and I think Stassi did something racist maybe a little bit more intentionally. So there's definitely levels of what's going on with people. But I always like to say that I like to see my reality stars grow and change, but I'm not sure that I really want them to grow and change. But in regards to this, I want them to grow and change.
Right.
I still want them to be monsters, but not racist monsters.
Right. Not racist monsters. I want keep the wine throwing and and you're sitting in my spot at my
narcissism,
party.
Keep the I need the best room bullshit. Stop with the, race baiting, please.
You ate the ribbon off of my birthday cake. Yeah, let's keep it.
Yeah, exactly.
So, let's talk.
Meanwhile, if someone ate the ribbon off a birthday cake on one of the Atlanta women's cakes, that fight would have ended totally differently. But speaking of race and housewives,
especially Nene's cake. Oh no.
I mean, it would not have been as nice as Heather Dubrow was about it. Well, not that Heather Dubrow was very nice, but you know what I'm saying.
Right. Okay, so you talked about how the housewives treat production and how
Mm-hmm.
there are housewives that are good to production and there are housewives that are not so good. Let's talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like how everybody works. I think it's like at every job, there are people who are just like game, and there are people sometimes that are a lot more difficult. And I think there is a learning curve for the women. Like, I talked to Kristen Takeman from Real Housewives of New York, and she said like her first year, there's no like class, there's no orientation. They're just like, show up at lunch and we're gonna start filming you. And they're kind of learning on the fly. And so I think that a lot of times they're not sure how to be natural. They don't know how to give a good bite in a confessional. They're learning on the job. And, it takes a few seasons to get really used to it. But also it was surprising who is really professional and who is really difficult to work with. Like everyone I talked to said Cynthia Bailey is just the sweetest. She'll do anything if you need to reschedule. She's like totally open, just easy as can be. Same with Tamara Barney, who, seems like a nightmare, but they called her Camera Tamara because whenever they turned the camera on her, she would deliver. And she was just like professional and there. And, and then you see people like Kenya Moore, who is hard to work with, Dorinda Medley, Carol Radziwill, so it's like, so it was surprising to me who was easy with, but it was not surprising to me who was difficult to work with.
Right. Now, do you think that there were cases where maybe a housewife was possibly on the chopping block, but the fact that she was nice and easy to work with saved her job?
I don't know that that is the case, but I definitely know that is something that production and Bravo is taking into account. It's like, why would you want to keep, if there's like Housewives A and B and they're both delivering the certain level of job performance, and one is nice as pie and always shows up on time and one is a nightmare, like I would choose the one who's easy to work with all the time. And that's one of the things in my own personal career, I just want everyone to say, oh my God, Brian was so easy to work with. Like that's just how I want to be is, always show up on time, always email back, always be nice, like try to be accommodating. And I think that's probably true of Housewives too, when it comes down to it.
Yeah, because it's I'm an actor as well. And a couple of summers ago, I booked a gig solely on the fact that the person that was directing it thought that I was nice and easy to work with, and like they needed a replacement and they called me. And that was a lesson to me, like, you never know, don't be a dick.
Well, and that's what I heard about the people who make those, how they do those commercials where it's like they're all the housewives are in a car, all the housewives go to talk about some movie, and it's like such a weird assortment of housewives. Apparently the ones they asked to make them are the ones who can learn lines, will show up on time, and are easy to work with. So it's like Melissa Gorga, Kyle, all these people who can do the job and are serious about it. So it's like maybe not the most famous or the most popular or whatever, but the ones who are going to show up and do their work. And that, I mean, is its own sort of skill.
Well, we're winding down now, but before I didn't want to leave though without talking about the salaries, because I found that very interesting as well. The fact that Kim and Kyle had to be paid the same when they were full time, and Kyle and Vanderpump had to be paid the same.
Yes, which I found very interesting too. And I see why that is, because with Kim and Kyle, I think that she never wanted to be in a position where it's like, you make more money or I make more money or whatever. And I think same with Lisa Vanderpump. She felt like we both started this thing together. We're the two that have been here the longest. Like we should make the same amount of money. And, because I think that that's not true of a lot of the other casts. And you see, a lot of disparities, especially now that they're trying to, and I think this is why we're seeing a lot of the old women, not old women, but
I know
women who have been on the shows longer, leaving, like Vicky or Tamara, who are, we're getting a raise every year, and now they're making like close to $1 million. Whereas I think they try to cap it around 500,000 ish a season now. Right. And so they're trying to keep the cost down.
And Marlo makes good money for being a friend of.
Yeah. Marlo makes good money for being a friend of. I mean, I feel like Marlo, you know how there are those people who never won an Oscar, but then they give them like an honorary Oscar at the end of their
Right.
career, whatever, some like humanitarian Oscar. I feel like Marlo needs a ceremonial peach. Like,
Seriously.
you know, you have delivered as much to this franchise as Gil ever did, if not more. Like,
Right.
your contribution should be recognized,
Right.
Marlo.
And you know, and I agree with you. She deserves a peach for sure. But at least she's being compensated.
Yes, yes. Well, and like also, you know, the difference between a friend of and a full-time cast member is that we see the full-time cast members in their own personal storyline and we see them at home. And now
Right.
with Marlo and those nephews, I am dying to see her at home. Like,
Yeah.
how crazy is it that your like guardian is Marlo Hampton? Like,
Right.
that is insane.
Right. Like that could be a spinoff, seriously. And I would watch it.
I mean, you should play Marlo's gay personal assistant on that sitcom.
I would do it. I would do it the second. I would unpack her bags and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I would hang the Gucci.
But then there are other friends of that don't get paid much or anything, right? So basically, just kind of depends on.
Yeah, and I think that Marlo, there are friends of that kind of get like, if a housewife comes back as a friend of, it's like, okay, we'll pay you X amount for 1 day of filming, and then however many days we need you. Whereas I think Marlo probably gets in her contract has like some kind of guarantees, like we'll pay you this much an episode, and you'll be in more than 50% of the episodes, or you know, whatever it is. I don't know that for a fact. That's just kind of what I'm assuming. Whereas, yeah, but usually the friends of don't make that much money unless they're friends of who, like someone like Barbara Kay, who was demoted to a friend of at the last minute,
Right.
where she probably signed a contract to be full-time and got paid as such. But I mean, that's only $60,000 for her first season, so it's not a ton of money. And now she's running for mayor of New York. So
I know, right?
I'd go for her.
So before we go, so where would you like to see the housewives go in the next few years? Do you think that because some people are now saying that they're kind of playing themselves out?
Yeah.
What do you think, and where do you see it going, and what would you like to happen?
I think that we definitely need more diversity amongst the casts, which we're seeing now, and I would like to see more of. I mean, diversity does not, someone says, scholar I talked to says this in the book, that diversity isn't just like adding a couple spices to it. It's kind of like changing up the recipe. So I would love to see, like, you know, even revisiting someplace like the Real Housewives of Brooklyn and have like a really diverse cast of like a group of friends in Brooklyn who is, you know, has an organic relationship together and are already a group, and see what that looks like. As well as adding more diverse cast to some of the traditionally white shows. But I also think that, I mean, I have Sarah Galley, who has a podcast called Andy's Girls, says in the book that I don't believe in God, but I believe in the Real Housewives. And I kind of feel the same way between like Bravo and Andy and the production companies. Like, they've never done us wrong. And I could never have said like, oh, I want Real Housewives of Potomac because I didn't know it existed. And now that it's here, I'm like, thank God for this. Right. And, you know, I think that some of the shows have become like too much like coworkers and a little bit disconnected. So I'd like to see some more organic bonds after these COVID seasons, a little bit bigger casts, and, you know, just get back to those people with longstanding relationships and see some of that happening. I'm really happy with, but I have complete faith in them to continue delivering an amazing show for us.
Great. And Brian, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for
having me. It was a pleasure.
It was, you know, I was in Clubhouse. You did a room on Clubhouse with my friend Paige and with my buddy Dave. And so I was in that Clubhouse and I was like, oh my God, I've got to try to get him on. So thank you for doing this. And where can the listeners find you? Where can we find you if you want to be found?
You can absolutely. You can find the book at the it's thehousewivesbook.com, and there's links on there for Amazon and like independent booksellers and everywhere else. You can find me on all social media platforms at Jay Moylan, and Vulture and I do a newsletter every 2 weeks called the Housewives Institute Bulletin. It comes out every other Friday, including this coming Friday, and you can sign up for that at vulture.com/housewives.
Thank you. And like I said, listeners, I am currently reading the book and it is good. You will get your money's worth with this one. And that is it. So until next time, keep reading. Bye.